A warm welcome to Diplomatic Channel. I am Amarachi Ubani. This week, we're all about the visit by the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken to Nigeria. Mr. Blinken had private conversations with President Muhammadu Buhari, the Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, and Foreign Affairs Minister Jeffrey Onyema. He then presented America's foreign policy for Africa at the ECOWAS Secretariat in Abuja. And before his exit from the country, spoke more in depth about America's relations with Nigeria in an exclusive interview with Channels Television. That's Diplomatic Channel in a wrap. Now, as usual, let's begin with the diplomatic headlines.
The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's visit to Nigeria was the second leg of his three-nation visit to Africa, and for Nigeria came after the purchase of a number of Super Tucano fighter jets from the United States. His conversation with President Muhammadu Buhari at the presidential villa on Thursday lasted about an hour, after which both decided to comment on the just submitted reports of the Lagos Judicial Panel following last year's EndSARS protest across the country. President Buhari said he will await steps to be taken by states and their reaction, not imposing ideas on them. During a media conference with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Jeffrey Onyema, Mr. Blinken said the U.S. is looking forward to Nigerian government's response to the report.
We can help to address some of the problems that have been key drivers of insecurity. To that end, let me say that we welcome the conclusion of the investigation by the independent inquiry established by the Lagos state government to look into the events that took place near Lekki toll gate in Lagos in October of 2020. This, of course, was amidst the EndSARS protests, including the killings and other alleged abuses by the security forces. We anticipate and look to the state and the federal government's response to the findings and expect those to include steps that ensure accountability and address the grievances of the victims and their families.
Speaking further on Nigeria-US relations, Mr. Onyema said partnership between the two countries is not about wielding more influence than China.
We have wonderful relations with the U.S. and we have wonderful relations with China, economic relations, and it'll be on an ad hoc basis and based on the interests of Nigeria, not on the interests of China or the interests of the U.S.
Mr. Blinken's meeting with the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, revolved around economic partnerships and agreements and their importance, especially in areas of infrastructure and intelligence support.
We know that there is much that we can do together to build our economies back even stronger after the pandemic, and much of that goes to the right kinds of investment in infrastructure, in green economies, in making sure that the investments we're making together are really a race to the top for our people.
The challenge of terrorism, especially of the sort we've seen with ISWAP and Boko Haram and ISIS, is that it will fester, and it can really take on the kinds of dimensions that may turn out to be much more grave than we ever thought. So I think that we need to do, working together again a lot in that particular respect.
On Friday, when he met with some innovators and entrepreneurs, the Secretary of State said the United States will continue to support innovation and entrepreneurship in Nigeria. As he toured exhibition stands at the Innovation Hub in Abuja, he commended the resilience of the innovators whose works are aimed at providing solutions to various sectors of the economy, encouraging news for upcoming entrepreneurs.
When I was last in Nigeria a few years ago, two things really struck me. One, of course, was the incredibly vibrant civil society that we see in this country, and I had an opportunity to talk to some of its leaders just a short while ago. But the other thing that really struck me the last time I was here was a remarkable spirit of innovation and entrepreneurship. And I was really eager to come here and, in a sense, see where things are, both to see some of the incredible innovative work that's been done, but also to try and understand what the environment is like for innovation, for entrepreneurship, how that can be made even better going forward. So I really wanted to hear from people who are on the front lines of this work, not only having great ideas, but, as Deji said, finding the ways to make them real and to bring them to market.
The U.S. Secretary of State left Nigeria for the third and final leg of his Africa tour, ending in Senegal.
Welcome back. One of the highlights of the U.S. Secretary of State's visit to Nigeria was the U.S. Africa Foreign Policy speech, which he delivered at the ECOWAS Secretariat in Abuja. Mr. Blinken wasted no time in highlighting Nigeria's unique and strategic position in Africa and around the world.
What happens here in Nigeria is felt around the world. And that, in a nutshell, is why I've come to Abuja. The United States knows that on most of the urgent challenges and opportunities we face, Africa will make the difference. We can't achieve our goals around the world, whether that's ending the COVID-19 pandemic, building a strong and inclusive global economy, combating the climate crisis, or revitalizing democracy and defending human rights, without the leadership of African governments, institutions, and citizens. This pandemic has revealed how vulnerable all of us are. We have to seize the opportunity to strengthen global health security. On this, the United States and the countries of Africa are uniquely well-positioned to lead, because we've spent decades working together to improve health across the continent. PEPFAR, for example, has saved millions of lives, brought the world to the edge of the first AIDS-free generation, and transformed public health infrastructure, including here in Nigeria, where the investments we made years ago in labs and clinics formed the backbone of this nation's COVID response. We know how to do this work together. Let's take on the challenge of global health security for the sake of our countries and countries around the world that will be safer if we act and we lead.
For a while now, many African countries have been looking to other countries except the United States for assistance with developmental projects and partnerships in security and other aspects. Mr. Blinken said America had noted that and that it did not intend to compete with those countries for Africa's attention, but to help Africa expand her choices. He rightly alluded to Africa taking her place as a major player in geopolitics and not a subject.
The United States has supported Africa's economic resilience throughout the pandemic. For example, by backing the suspension of debt for 32 African countries to date and getting more capital flowing to your economies. Looking ahead, we want to help create the kind of opportunity that doesn't benefit only the well-off, but creates good jobs for people at every income level and lays the foundation for more inclusive and environmentally sustainable growth for years to come. That's why we admire the African Union's Green Recovery Action Plan, particularly its emphasis on climate finance. The Prosper Africa initiative aims to increase two-way trade and investment. Our Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, known as AGOA, provides duty-free access to American markets, and we're working to make sure African countries take full advantage of it. We welcome the African Continental Free Trade Area because we want to see Africa's economic power in the world grow. More consumers should gain access to African goods and services. More jobs must be created for Africa's young people, the global workforce of the future. And together, we can help shape the rules of the world economy to ensure that the benefits of trade are widely shared and do a better job of protecting our workers, our innovation, and our planet. The global minimum tax, which 130 countries have agreed to, is a strong step in the right direction. It will raise billions in revenues for countries and end the global race to the bottom that had corporations moving from one place to another to pay as little in taxes as they could. Finally, our commitment to inclusive growth is behind our Build Back Better World initiative, which aims to help close the global infrastructure gap. The need is staggering. It'll cost trillions of dollars a year to close that gap. But we have to act. because infrastructure needs are holding back growth and opportunity in too many places. By meeting those needs, we can improve people's lives, strengthen economies, and protect the planet at the same time.
Now he talks about democracy in recession, rightly pointing out the 4 coups that have taken place on the continent so far, and rule of law corroded by police brutality and distrust among citizens of their country's government, happening all over the world, including the United States. And these were among the 5 points of his speech, which include a global pandemic, climate change, post-pandemic economy, and security.
This is a critical moment. Authoritarianism is on the rise around the world. Technology is being used to silence dissent and prosecute citizens. And democracies must answer the call to fight back against disinformation, stand up for internet freedom, reduce the misuse of surveillance technology, establish standards of responsible conduct in cyberspace. Meanwhile, governments are becoming less transparent. Corruption is growing. In many places, elections are flashpoints for violence. And the pandemic has accelerated many of these trends. We see this happening across Africa. Leaders ignoring term limits, rigging or postponing elections, exploiting social grievances to gain and maintain power, arresting opposition figures, cracking down on the media, and allowing security services to enforce pandemic restrictions with brutality. Many Africans are now living under at least partially authoritarian governments. And militaries have taken over civilian governments 4 times this year. That's the highest number in 4 decades. There are good news stories about democracy in Africa, too. In Niger, which had its first ever peaceful transfer of power this year. Or Zambia, where the opposition party won elections, something few believed would be allowed to happen. Citizens there woke up long before dawn, some sleeping all night at polling stations, to make sure that they could vote. And even in places where democracy is under duress, it's inspiring to see people courageously raising their voices and calling for change, like the citizens marching in the streets and cities across Sudan to restore the civilian-led transition. Still, the recession of democracy in many places in Africa cannot be denied, and it is not the will of the people. Survey after survey in countries across the continent show that the people of Africa, be they Ghanaian or Zambian or Ugandan or Tanzanian, support democracy. When given the choice between multi-party elections or strongman rule, one-party states or military control, they choose multi-party elections. That makes it all the more important that leaders show leadership and stop the democratic backsliding that is wiping away their citizens' aspirations. Now, I want to emphasize that democratic backsliding is not just an African problem. It's a global problem. My own country is struggling with threats to our democracy. And the solutions to those threats will come as much from Africa as from anywhere. We need countries from every part of the world to share best practices, to make public pledges, to hold each other accountable. And we need to show how democracies can deliver what citizens want, quickly and effectively.
Before his departure from Nigeria, Mr. Blinken had a chat with my colleague, Maokbe Ogun-Yusuf, on issues regarding U.S.-Nigeria foreign policy. We'll take a short break now. We'll return for the rest of the interview with the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. Stay with us.
People are talking about how this is a resuscitation. Your visit to Africa is a resuscitation of U.S.-Africa policy. And you're thinking that this time around, perhaps, your policy is going to be tailored to every country's needs. Is that going to be the case this time around?
Well, yes, it has to be, because even though there are lots of common denominators, all of our partners also have differences, distinct opportunities, distinct needs. So we have to be able to do that. But at the same time, I think there's a larger framework that we're looking at, because when we're thinking about the big challenges that we have to meet and face and overcome, as well as the real opportunities that are before us, we know that as a general matter, we can't do it without Africa. Over the next 25 or 30 years, 1 in 4 people on this earth will be African. We have one of the most dynamic, youthful populations in the world with extraordinary energy, innovation, entrepreneurship, some of which I've seen right here at Innovate, where we're speaking. And we have to be able to partner with that and to work together, because think about this. When it comes to dealing with climate change, we can't do it alone. And here, Africa in particular is a place of tremendous potential for innovation, for finding solutions to the climate challenge. Building global health security, we have to be able to do that in partnership with Africa. We have a strong track record. We have to build on that. Creating more inclusive economies that bring more people in. Here too, in Nigeria, the largest economy in Africa, those are the kinds of things that we're working on. But across the board, the bottom line is, for the United States, when we're thinking about these big challenges, these big opportunities, it has to be in partnership with Africa.
Well, speaking more specifically about your trip to Nigeria, some people have said that you've come at a most auspicious time, at a time when, at the subnational level, the Lagos State Judicial Panel has submitted a report on NSAS. And the United States government has at least the U.S. mission here in Nigeria has released a statement on that. The question will be, what lessons do you think, because police brutality seems to be something a number of countries are struggling with. The United States has had its own fair share. What lessons do you think Nigeria can learn from how the United States has handled its own experience, especially in the wake of the killing of George Floyd?
Well, you're exactly right that countries are facing this challenge, dealing with this challenge, including the United States, and exactly in our case with instances of police brutality, the Black Lives Matter movement that sprung up from that. But here in Nigeria, I think what's so essential is this: you have now in Lagos the state panel that's issued its report. That in and of itself is a very important and powerful thing, because it brings transparency to these incidents, to the allegations of abuse by the security forces. But what's even more vital now is for there to be action following up on the report, action at the state level, action at the federal level.
Do you have any specific expectations of that?
Well, I think we have to see once the report is actually published and we understand exactly what happened. Two things need to follow from that. And this is true across the board, whether it's in the United States or anywhere else. What are the necessary reforms to make sure that that can't happen again? How do you build trust between citizens and the security forces, and more broadly the state? And also accountability, to make sure that any individuals who are responsible for committing abuses are actually brought to justice, which is another way of building trust between the citizens and the security forces. That trust is so vital because, of course, Nigeria faces very difficult security challenges in virtually every part of the country. And it's necessary to deal with them in a way that has trust between the citizens and the state, which has the responsibility of making sure that its citizens are secure, while at the same time upholding their rights.
There are always fears, though, especially when it comes to reports like this. The U.S.-Nigeria relations were somewhat, well, I think they warmed up somewhat a little with the sale of the Tucano aircraft. However, before then, there has been some strain in terms of how the fight against Boko Haram was going, and U.S. support in that regard. And now there are fears again that perhaps as a result of this, perhaps the Leahy laws could come up once again in terms of sale of equipment to to Nigeria in terms of assistance. What are your thoughts on that?
There are two things that are important here. First, and more broadly, given the vital role that Nigeria plays, not just in Africa, but increasingly around the world, given the size of its economy, given the size of its democracy, we need to have a relationship that reflects that. And I think it needs to be more sustained. There needs to be more regular, high-level engagement between us, because that's what the relationship deserves, and I'm committed to that. But when it comes particularly to security questions, look, there are two things that are important. Yes, the hardware that is necessary to deal with security challenges like the Super Tucanos, that's important. But as important is the software, the human software that has to go along with that. And one of the things that we've been doing in partnership with Nigeria is making sure, for example, that people are well trained, not just in how to use the equipment, but how to use it in a way that upholds the rights of citizens. And so, for example, pilots and controllers being trained on how to fly these missions in a way that goes after the bad guys and doesn't hurt the good guys, to make sure that it's done in accordance with the law of armed conflict, to make sure that if there are mistakes or problems committed, those are brought to light immediately and corrected. So it's the marriage of the hardware that we can provide, but also the human software that's so important. And it's that kind of relationship that we want to build going forward.
Vaccine inequity continues to, dominate the discussions. I know that the United States has been very supportive, providing over 7.5 million
Yes.
doses, available under the COVAX scheme and under other, bilaterally, so to
Yes.
speak. However, the inequity remains. I think just about 5% of Africa's population is vaccinated. Is there anything extra which the United States would be doing to help bridge the deficit?
Yes. For us, this inequity is unacceptable. It's wrong, but beyond being wrong, it's also incredibly dangerous, including for us, because as long as the virus is replicating somewhere, it may be mutating. As long as it's mutating and new variants arise, something may come along that defeats the existing vaccines. And so, frankly, it's in our interest, but it's also the right thing to do. So we have a commitment over the next 6 to 9 months. We will be donating around the world, including in Africa, a total of more than 1 billion vaccines. And we're doing that primarily through COVAX, so that it gets to countries most in need. And we're doing it without any political strings attached. Second, you may have heard just the other day that President Biden announced a major new investment in vaccine production to make sure that we have for the world the sufficient number of vaccines that will meet the need. Finally, one of the problems that we see in different countries, including here in Africa, including here in Nigeria, is the last mile problem. The vaccines may exist, we may have the right number, but getting shots into arms is the challenge. There are logistical problems, storage challenges, et cetera. We've developed something called the global COVID Corps that brings some of our most talented private sector companies to bring their expertise, working closely with partner countries to figure out what the problems are and to fix them. So all of these things will be happening. Last thing I'll say is this. It's really important that there be increased manufacturing capacity for vaccines in Africa. So whether that can happen in time to address the current pandemic, we'll see. We'd like to see that happen. But when we're thinking about the long term, making sure that there's production here so that when there is an outbreak, it can be addressed much more quickly, efficiently, effectively is really important.
Secretary, I'm going to ask you one more question, and this is about democracy. As Nigeria goes into the general elections come 2023, you've said that democracy is in recession. It was the same across the world. What lessons would you like Nigeria to take away from the elections that happened in the United States in 2020 as Nigeria goes into the elections in 2023?
Well, mostly what I hope is that Nigeria will be a strong lesson for the world, for Africa, for the world. Because, first, the fact that President Buhari is respecting term limits is in and of itself a very important and powerful thing when we see in other countries leaders who have decided to ignore them. And I know how strongly he feels about that, having spoken to him the other day. Second, if the election, as we anticipate and hope, goes off smoothly, freely, fairly, with real participation, that also will send a very, very strong message about democratic resilience. But also, I think there has to be something more. One of the reasons that citizens are losing faith in some places in democracy, in the institutions, is because they feel that it's not delivering for them. It's not actually producing things that they need, that they want, and that will make a difference in their lives. And so, in different countries, including in Nigeria, when everything is done based on patronage, as opposed to actually delivering on the things that people need, that actually erodes trust and confidence in democracy. The more the government can be responsive to the needs of people, the more they'll say, you know what, this system works. I want to be a part of it. I want to defend it. And that, I think, will create enthusiasm around the elections, and that'll also send a very important message to countries throughout the continent and around the world.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you.
That's the program this week. I'm always open to your questions and comments. The address to reach me on is on your screen. I'm Amarachi Ubani. I'll see you next time.